Hello, hello. Happy Tuesday. We're having some fun today with embossing powders. All kinds of goofy, cool stuff. All right, let me pull you guys up on the screen here so I can see your comments. And we're gonna get started. Beautiful. Okay. Whoa, and we want to mute my silly voice. Okay. Alright, guys. Lots of interesting stuff today. We're going to be talking about embossing powder. There's lots of companies out there that make embossing powder, but I wanted to talk first of all about the different kinds of embossing powder that you can buy. Yes, there are different kinds. Okay, so we're going to get right into it. I'm not making finished projects for Technique Tuesdays, but I'm talking about either techniques or products, things like that. Okay. So one of the first kinds of embossing powders is a detailed or super fine powder. And this should be smaller than grains of sand. And this is used for more detailed embossing. So if your image has very fine lines or you're embossing a sentiment, something that's very thin, this is the type of powder that you want to look for. So it's a super fine or a detailed embossing powder. Okay. Perfect. And of course you can get this in all kinds of colors. Okay. So the next one is, let's see if I can find my example here. Here's one. Okay, so this is a regular sized granulation of powder. So it's a little bit thicker than the superfine. It's still smaller than grains of sand, but the particles are a little bit bigger. Okay, so this can be used for all kinds of things. It just sometimes it doesn't quite work for thin detailed lines. Okay. Next you can get, and this one is quite chunky. This one is a mix of different colored particles. And there are some chunky bits, some large bits, and some fine as a mix. So we will emboss this one so I can show it to you a little bit better in a bit. Okay. And then I'm going to get embossing powder everywhere. Okay. Then there is ultra thick embossing enamel. This is sometimes called UT. So UTEE, UT. And this kind of embossing powder is very granular. It looks almost like sugar. And yes, you can get it in different colors. This just happens to be clear. Comes in lots of different colors. And it is very, very thick granules because you want to cover something with a greater thickness of embossing. And that's why you would use something that was thick and granular like this. So if you were covering, sometimes people make their own personal charms. Sometimes people cover their coasters with it to make them waterproof, that kind of thing. And you can use this to make some really neat crackle effect on your projects. So I really like having at least a jar of the UD clear stuff. And of course, there's lots of companies that carry this. And you can get it in other colors too. Okay. Beautiful. So that's all the different sizes of granules. So it depends on what you need your powder for as to what size of granule that you're going to need. All right, let's actually do some talk about some of the things that you need when you're doing embossing. Let me just do a quick cleanup. I'm just going to spray water And wipe with my microfiber cloth and get some of those particles off. Okay. So you do need a couple of things when you are doing embossing. So you need some kind of sticky ink. Now, the most used is something like a Versamark. It's a clear, sticky ink. But that's not to say that you can't use other inks. So, for instance, you can actually use Catherine Pooler inks because they stay wet for a little bit longer. And they don't dry really quickly, or give you at least a couple of seconds. You can use other inks. You can even use water to emboss. So if you spray your water on your page and then apply your embossing powder fairly quickly, you can absolutely get that product to stick. And of course, to make your magic happen, you need some form of heat tool. Okay, there's lots out on the market. There's tools that have different speeds. And a embossing heat tool is not a hairdryer. Two completely different things. This pushes heat and less air, whereas your hairdryer pushes air out that's heated. So in a sense, this is a lot hotter when you apply this. So hair dryers don't work. They push too much air. Okay, just so you know. And there's multiple heating tools. I mean, I think I've had this thing for 15 years or more. So it's an oldie. I don't even know if they make this one anymore. So lots of different options out there. Okay, let's do some examples. Let's do some examples. Okay, the other thing, and I almost forgot, that's key, is if you know anything about particles that are this fine, they like to go everywhere and anywhere. So if you take an anti-static tool, now mine is like a powder based and it's stuck in between the two pieces of felt, so that when I apply this surface to a piece of paper, even just my sheet here, what it does is it applies a very, very thin coating and allows the ink to be the only sticky place where your fine powder will stick. So this is kind of a mandatory type tool. There's all different versions of this too. This is like a really old version. Again, I've probably had this one for 15 years. Yeah, 15 years, and I'm still using it. You can get brush style. And if you don't have anything, just use a little bit of talcum powder or baby powder on a paintbrush. Works the same way. Okay. So the other thing too is whatever your catch-all is for your powder, I also like to apply this just like I did. So when all of the powder comes off your project and you want to funnel it back in your container, it tends to come off really easily. Okay, so I'm going to use another piece of paper here, and this is why. Okay, so I'm going to use a sticky ink. We're going to try Versamark here first. So I'm just going to dab it on to the end, and then I take out the sticky part, okay? And we're going to try the green one because it's sitting here. This is just happens to be an Adirondack embossing powder called Lettuce, kind of a neat name. And all you do to apply is apply your sticky ink where you want it. Give your paper a couple of taps, okay? Set your project aside, okay? And this is the beauty of why you powder your surface, okay? And then you just use that piece of paper as your funnel. And then just blowing off the edge there. Okay, we're gonna set this aside. Make sure you close up your powder first before you turn on your heat gun. Tip and like key. Otherwise, you're going to spray your powder everywhere. Okay. So I have my powder applied to my surface. And we're going to turn on the heat gun. Now, always let your heat gun warm up a few seconds before you start applying the heat to the surface. Okay? Give it, a good 10 seconds just to warm up to its max. This will help with warping, because if you don't want your paper to be all wavy. So let the heat up a couple of seconds and then apply the heat. And try to keep your heat tool moving, because you don't want to leave it in one spot for a long time. And then your surface will turn from a powdery one to something with a sheen. Most embossing powders have a sheen to them. Some of them are designed to be a matte surface, which means they don't have a shine to them. But the majority of powders are shiny. Okay, it's made of little teeny tiny plastic particles. Okay, so there you go. Let's see. Tip: if you don't have a specific color of embossing powder, you can kind of make your own. Watch this. Okay, so I'm just going to pull in some kind of stamp here. We're going to use something kind of fat. So this is Photoplay's confetti stamp sets, which I used not too long ago. Actually, I'm going to use a bigger piece of paper. And I'm going to pull in my mini Misty here. Okay. So I'm just going to hold this sucker down. Okay, so if you don't have a specific color of embossing powder and you want something colored and embossed, try this trick first. Okay, we're embossing your embossing powder first. Okay, remember removing static and making it not sticky. Okay, so you're going to take whatever color ink that you want to use so it matches your card. You're going to ink up your stamp and make sure that it's the way you want it. Oh, got a little less ink on the top. And then, because this ink stays somewhat are a little bit wet, I'm gonna take this one is called Halo. So it's basically a clear with some shiny bits to it. And always give a little flick or a tap, okay, to your project. And if you find that you have particles that you have in a place where you don't want them, just take a little paintbrush and you're going to brush them off. Okay, this is a good tip. The other tool that you can use, especially if something's, say, caught in the middle of the bee, you could take your pick or a knife or whatever to move out those particles. And now, of course, clear is not going to make that much of a difference. But just so you know, if you had like black flecks, you could remove it with those tools. And then, of course, make sure you put your extra back in. Tell me how I know this. Put the top on. Tricks of the trade, right? So now you have a sparkly blue sentiment. Again, I'm letting my tool heat up a little bit. If you have a chunky powder, then start embossing a little bit farther away and work your way towards your project. Okay? Now, if you think that your embossing powder is really chunky, like this stuff is like super chunky, so let's go and use this. Put this back up here. We're going to use the same stamp just because it's easy peasy. Okay. just give it a clean. So this time, I'm going to grab, hang on. Okay, we're going to grab a piece of cardstock here. And remember, this stuff is super chunky, okay? So it's not meant to do something detailed, typically. Okay, so we need our sticky ink. In this case, we're using Versamark. We're going to, you know what, and I forgot to put embossing powder on in here. This is why you don't do this. Okay, there is my HBD in sticky Versamark. Okay, this is super chunky. Okay, it does have different sized elements in it. So tap it, give it a flick. Okay, there are some stragglers out there, and that's why we tend to use that embossing powder, buddy. So I'm missing a few spots. So you can go in and just put a little bit more on. They will stick. And then, of course, you can use your paintbrush trick if you want. And if you're just going to die cut it out, generally, sometimes it doesn't even matter. Okay, so if I've got chunky stuff, let's get rid of this. The best way to start embossing is from underneath. Okay, so this is chunky, so it has bigger particles sitting on top. So start embossing from the back side of your cardstock. I'm just heating up my heat tool, and we're going to go from underneath. Okay, it's a great way to start with a chunky embossing. Now, because it has to go through that three-dimensional cardstock, it will take a little bit longer. And then once you've got it kind of starting to melt, you can come to the top. Okay, and this one's kind of cool, but hard to see. But this one has like copper flecks, some black, some silver. It's very kind of granite kind of appearing once you melt it. Yeah, it's hard to catch on camera, but it's really cool. So, I mean, you can always do chunky, do regular sized, super fine. I mean, look at how bright that is. Isn't that cool? Excellent stuff to experiment with. Okay, we're going to do a quick tidy up, and I want to show you one more exciting thing that you can do with a specific type of powder. Okay. And you know what? We're going to use the same stamp again because it's just easy. It's already prepared. Okay. I'm going to put my paper in here. Come on, little fella. All right. Okay. We're going to use Versamark. Now, this stuff is called bonding powder. Okay. What this is a embossing powder that basically comes out to be kind of like an adhesive or tacky. So you can stick things like foil. Sorry, my camera is not cooperating. So you can stick things like foil to this. This is brilliant stuff. Okay, so, and you use it just like an embossing powder. Okay, so we're making the same HBD as our example. And I tend to do a few times stamping. And the reason why is if your paper is textured, it doesn't stick as well, right? So use your Versamark. That's why you got a stamping tool. Hello, Beth. Okay, so this is bonding powder. Okay. This is from Wow. You sprinkle it just like an embossing powder. Okay, tap off your excess. Put your excess back in the bottle. Hello, Anita. All right. Bonding powder. Okay, so you're going to do the same thing. And you need foil. Now this has to be the foil that works with heat, not the foil that works with the dye that you might have, like the lasered dye. Okay, this is just good old deco foil. Okay, you can get lots of different cool things. And don't you just love this? This is called Rainbow Shattered Glass. So you can have lots of fun with this, and you don't need extra tools. Hooray. Okay, so we've got our embossing powder. We're going to heat this up. This stuff heats pretty darn fast. Okay, so once it turns shiny, that's the trick. Hopefully I can get this to go. Now, I find it ideal if you stick it while it's warm and use something to burnish it. So you could use a popsicle stick, but bone folder works really well. Okay, watch this. Are you ready? It's already kind of pulled off, but look at that. Now, I will warn you that with this stuff, you don't always get like a super clear image. Sometimes it's a little bit distressed looking. So be aware that when doing this and using this powder, it's not going to be like putting it through your laminator or your Mink or something like that. It's a little bit more textured, right? So be aware this is not going to be probably a great thing to use with sentiments unless it's big and fat like this, because you're not going to get the detail out of it like you would something that was printed and using it that kind of way. So just be aware. But yeah, another fun embossing powder. So you can kind of do double duty. Yeah, cool, eh? If you're just starting embossing, I highly recommend that you get a white detailed embossing powder. You get a clear detail embossing powder. And then whatever kind of metallics that you like. And of course, there's lots of companies out there. Like, get a gold, a silver, and start with those 4. If you want a black embossing powder, the best thing to do is to do the ink trick. Black embossing powder is naughty. It likes to go everywhere. So I would recommend doing some kind of sticky black ink, and then put clear over top of it, or do a regular black ink. So I'll show you this. Here's another trick for you. Okay, we're going to use the same stamp again. This is another way to get a colored ink. So you can use any kind of ink for this. I'm going to use VersaFine, okay? This is a black ink I really, really like. And this is if you don't have a colored anything. So you can go, oh, my paper's short. So stamp this, okay? You need a stamping tool for this. You need to remove this. And of course, I forgot to ink up or wet down my cloth today. Oops. So clean your stamp off really well. Don't move it. And then you're going to bring in your Versamark. So you still got it in the same spot. Use your sticky ink right over top because this is transparent. You're just literally making that same spot sticky again. So you can do this with any color as well. So put your ink down. It can be dry. Put your sticky ink over top. And then put your clear over top there. And then you've made any color embossed. Here we go with our clear. And of course you can see the granular nature when you add embossing powders. Okay. I'm going to close this before I put my hand in it. Okay, and again, 5 seconds of warm up. And the magic happens. That surface turns glossy, and you have then heat embossed it. And now you have an embossed black image, even without a black embossing powder. So, yep. So clear, white, and your favorite metallics. It's a great way to start, and then you can get into all the fun things. Yeah. And did you know that you can make your own mixes? Yes, you can. Let's do one of those too. I'm going to put this back in my MISTI. So for one project, I wanted something to look like sand one time. Oh, let's trim this out. So I made my own mix of embossing powders to make it look like sand. I just mixed a whole bunch of colors that kind of look like they might look like sand, and did my own. Okay, this one's going to be close. Oops, I should use the other side here. 1 second, 1 second. Magnets are stuck together. Okay, so there we go. So you can make your own mix. So I'm just going to grab my little doohickey here. Okay, so you can take anything. You can take, let's see, a little bit of pink. And you don't need much of this stuff. Little pink. You can get like super creative with this. Let's put in some metallic red. This has glitter in it. Don't need much. It's for, let's say, Valentine's Day. And then, oh yeah, you ever seen glow-in-the-dark embossing powder? Brilliant! They also make scented embossing powder. Hello, Sandy. So we're just making our custom mix. Here, we're going to put a little bit of gold in. So again, you can totally make up your own. Now, I would suggest just throwing this in the garbage when you're done, because I don't know where you're ever going to store it. That's why you only need like a tinkle of each one. I'm just going to mix this up. Make sure that the static. Okay, there we go. So again, don't forget this. Put your anti-static powder tool down. Your good old sticky ink of choice. Mine is Versamark. It's just readily available in most stores, especially in the scrap and stamp shop. Okay, slide that out. In comes the paper. Versamark stays wet pretty long, so we're going to sprinkle our homemade stuff. And if it's not fully covered, that's where your sheet comes into play. You can pour it right over top of that image again. Just make sure you get it stuck in all the places that you need it to be stuck. Give it a couple of good tappies. And you know what? See, I've only got a tinkle left. That's going to the garbage. And here we go with our custom blend. Couple of seconds. And again, you can heat from the bottom or the top. Just keep it moving a little bit. Oh, this is kind of cool. This would be a great Valentine's sentiment. So it has a little bit of red sparkle, some gold, and that fabulous highlighter pink. Yeah. So yeah, lots of fun and lots of things to do with embossing powders. There's all kinds on the market. Try them out. We have tons of them in the Scrap and Stamp store, including detailed ones, and we also have the bonding powder too, so that you can try out all of your deco foils with it because it makes it fun. You do your background stamps and then foil them. How cool is that? So thanks for joining me for my first Technique Tuesday, and we'll see you again next week and hopefully on Sunday. Thanks again, guys. Have a great day.